Johnny Carson held the status of the most composed man in America. On television, he easily cornered seasoned politicians and controlled the most arrogant stars. However, the history of The Tonight Show recorded 9 special exceptions. These 9 women stepped into the studio and directly broke Johnny's confidence. They did not resort to offensive, skimpy outfits to grab attention. They created attraction through a subtle and overwhelming provocativeness, a calculated gaze, a flirtatious leg cross, and razor-sharp retorts before that carnal allure. Johnny Carson lost his daily sharp edge. He became a flustered man, constantly wiping sweat from his forehead and having to look away. From the fiery flirtatiousness of Carol Wayne and the nonchalance of Tuesday Weld to the wild vitality of Pam Grier. They all created explosive dialogues. They used sensuality to force the most powerful host to concede. However, the charm on the airwaves was merely an artistic shell for a brutal reality. Behind the flirtations that left Johnny Carson bewildered, how did these 9 sex bombs actually use their bodies and intellects to survive amidst Hollywood's darkest tragedies? Carol Wayne puts her body on the betting table. During the golden years of The Tonight Show, Johnny Carson's comedy sketches never seemed complete without the appearance of Carol Wayne. Television audiences remembered her as the ditzy assistant with a permanent smile. However, every time the velvet curtain rose, Carol stepped out and immediately ignited a fire of desire that scorched the air in the studio. She carried a stifling, intense, and undeniable carnal gravity. Contrary to her manufactured ditzy persona, Carol was a true sex bomb who understood perfectly the lethal weapon of her own body. She glided across the stage in bold, deep-cut silk dresses, fully displaying a fiery physique that challenged every standard. Every playful toss of her hair and every innocent tilt of her body was precisely calculated to take the breath away of millions of male viewers. Even the highly experienced king of television, Johnny Carson, was frequently caught off guard, awkwardly clearing his throat in the face of the artistic flirtatiousness surrounding his desk. She was never overshadowed. She completely commanded the gaze of the most powerful man in late night. That deadly charm didn't stop on the airwaves, behind the lens. Carol took that whirlwind of flesh to sweep through the most luxurious casinos in Las Vegas. Endless nights of gambling left her submerged in massive debts when cash ran dry. She wisely used her own provocativeness as a stake. Carol's amorous gaze and fiery body defeated the most seasoned gamblers, leading them to voluntarily tear up IOUs worth tens of thousands of dollars just in exchange for her presence in their revelry. However, beauty could not help her win forever at the betting table, and the life of that sex bomb ended mysteriously in shallow waters in Mexico. Carol Wayne used sensuality to write off debts, but right after her, another woman used her own fiery body to work frantically, gritting her teeth to pay off a massive $1 million debt left by her late husband. A $1 million debt hidden behind Edie Adams' cigar. Whenever Edie Adams glided into the Tonight Show studio, the air seemed to thicken with a mature and sophisticated allure. American audiences were well acquainted with the image of her reclining on television, a Muriel cigar between her fingers, softly exhaling a misty cloud of smoke and whispering provocative invitations. Edie didn't act innocent or ambiguous. She radiated the magnetism of a woman of the world, possessing absolute understanding of the power of her gaze and the curves of her body. When she sat opposite Johnny Carson, crossing her long, slender legs, her sharp wit forced even a composed man like Johnny to be cautious in every response. In the guest chair, she was radiant and magnificent in form-fitting evening gowns, fully displaying her carnal appeal to satisfy the gaze of millions. But behind the flirtatious smile and those smoking cigars was a stiflingly brutal reality. In 1962, her husband, comedian Ernie Kovacs, perished in a horrific traffic collision. He didn't just leave her alone in glamorous Hollywood, he left behind a massive tax debt amounting to millions of dollars. The government came knocking, creditors swarmed, lawyers constantly urged her to file for bankruptcy to shed the burden. But Edie refused. She decisively would not let her family's legacy collapse. She hid her panic, donned her sexiest outfits, and turned her body and reputation into a tool for labor. She exhausted her strength, accepting every performance offer, from singing at bustling nightclubs and filming provocative commercials to signing onto miscellaneous television roles. She coldly converted her sexual appeal into debt payment checks. Every dollar earned from her fiery sex bomb image was signed by her and sent directly to the tax office, with an iron determination hidden beneath a flirtatious shell. Edie Adams personally wiped out the massive debt. Audiences saw a fiery starlet. But the truth behind the lens was a pragmatic and resilient mind. Edie's sharpness helped her survive her darkest hour. But in the next interview, Johnny Carson would face a sex bomb with even more intimidating intellect, an anonymous genius with an IQ exceeding 160, who used her very provocativeness to hide a superior mind before flatly turning her back on the entire Hollywood spotlight. Jill St. John conceals an IQ of 162. When Jill St. John strode into The Tonight Show studio, every eye was immediately locked onto her fiery figure. America knew her as the magnificent Bond girl, who always appeared in skimpy outfits and was frequently entangled in perilous situations on screen. In the guest chair, Jill continued to inhabit that role fully. She wore a sheer silk dress with bold cuts. She crossed her long legs, tossed her hair, and continuously flashed flirtatious, provocative smiles. The audience cheered wildly. Johnny Carson bantered with lewd jokes about her appearance. Jill responded with a ditzy attitude, intentionally quashing any public suspicion regarding her intellectual capacity. However, behind that mask of foolishness was a rare, superior mind. Jill actually possessed an IQ of 162. As soon as the stage lights went out, the flirtatiousness on her face immediately vanished. Returning to her dressing room, she paid no mind to the hollow flirtations of male producers. She sat quietly, opening financial reports and analyzing complex legal documents. Jill saw right through the brutal nature of the film industry. She realized the Hollywood moguls only viewed her as a piece of carnal merchandise that brought in profit. They forced her into cheap, sexually suggestive roles and bound her with exploitative contracts. A superior intellect would not allow Jill to settle for being a puppet. Her provocativeness on the airwaves was merely a sharp tool to accumulate financial power. When she felt she had gathered enough capital, Jill immediately struck the decisive blow. She walked straight into the offices of the studio executives, placed her contract termination on the desk, unilaterally canceled all agreements, and walked away. She decisively discarded the title of sex symbol. She left Hollywood to transition into the restaurant business, proving her ability to command an economic empire with her own head. Jill St. John's withdrawal was full of calculation, silence, and cold precision. However, that turning away was nothing compared to the next sex bomb. Soon, audiences would witness a woman who loathed the spotlight to an extreme degree, ready to personally kick down every blockbuster project to bury her star status in the grittiest independent films. Ruthless contempt from Tuesday Weld. While other stars usually entered The Tonight Show with a thirst for every eye in the room, Tuesday Weld brought to the studio a completely opposite atmosphere, a silent but stifling resistance. Without the need for a magnificent entrance or flamboyant, flirtatious gestures, Tuesday dominated the space with a sharp and wild beauty. She sat in the guest chair, wearing an outfit that accentuated her fiery curves, but her gaze projected a coldness bordering on arrogance. Her provocativeness was not a gift offered to please the crowd, but a weapon of psychological dominance. Even a master of the stage like Johnny Carson had to slow down, cautiously bantering with every word, because he understood very well the extreme nonchalance present right in front of him. In the cinema capital of that era, Tuesday Weld was a gem that every studio mogul desperately hunted. They craved turning her into a new money-printing machine, a perfect sex symbol to fill the box offices. Producers lined up, offering her high-profile blockbuster projects, scripts filled with provocative scenes, and checks featuring astronomical numbers. They promised a radiant, monopolized status where she only needed to obediently wear skimpy clothes and smile politely for the camera. However, in response to that fervent pursuit was absolute contempt. Tuesday loathed being framed as a soulless sex bomb. She decisively cast aside a series of commercial hits, personally smashing the glamorous crown that Hollywood tried to mold. Instead of chasing the brilliant spotlight, she plunged into low-budget independent film projects, forcing herself into eccentric, dark, and gritty roles. She used that extreme refusal to bury her provocative image, accepting the trade of a rose-strewn career to keep artistic control for herself. Tuesday, Weld chose to bury her star status in her own homeland to protect her self-respect. But that rebellion didn't seem to be the peak. In the next tape, Johnny Carson would open the file on a sex bomb with an even more decisive move. Someone ready to completely break off with America, pack her bags, and fly straight to Europe to build her own cinematic empire. Carol Baker packs her bags and escapes to Europe. The lens of The Tonight Show usually only recorded the glamorous surface of the entertainment world, completely obscuring the fierce battles behind the lights. Carol Baker's appearance on television was always accompanied by the noise of a controversial sex symbol. The public remembered her through flirtatious, provocative roles in commercial films, sitting in the guest chair. Carol played the role the crowd craved to the fullest. She wore a tight dress, showcasing the provocativeness of her figure, performed flirtatious glances, and laughed in response to Johnny Carson's jokes. The grandstand was filled with whistles and wild applause. However, the moment the camera system stopped operating, that obedience also immediately ended. The panorama of Carol's career was a direct confrontation with the exploitation of the studio system. Executives continuously placed stacks of scripts on her desk requiring her to strip. They forced her to repeat erotic actions on screen to maximize box office profits. Carol took all those scripts and threw them straight into the trash. She stood facing the male producers, looked them in the eye, and decisively refused every demand to show her body. This act of resistance immediately triggered a brutal punishment from Hollywood's upper crust. Studio moguls simultaneously issued a wide-reaching embargo. They struck her name from every casting list. Brands immediately revoked sponsorship contracts. The entire work schedule of an A-list star was wiped clean overnight. Faced with a total blockade, Carol did not concede or seek out offices to compromise. She personally packed her bags, bought a one-way plane ticket, and dragged her suitcase out of America. Setting foot in Europe, she went straight to the bank to withdraw all her savings. She personally stepped up to hire crews, negotiate contracts, and pour money into producing horror film projects with a strong personal style. She sat at the same table with directors, directly editing scripts and deciding every production stage. Carol had decisively stripped Hollywood of all its manipulative power over her. Carol Baker proactively left America to take charge of her own career. However, in the next chapter, the departure was not a voluntary choice at all. Johnny Carson will open the file on a woman who stood tall, loudly protesting the war in the middle of a political luncheon, and had to suffer a ruthless sentence of exile lasting 10 long years. The 10-year exile of Eartha Kitt. The presence of Eartha Kitt always created an atmosphere of absolute dominance. Television audiences were captivated by her signature raspy, deep voice and the fiery curves accentuated through skin-tight evening gowns. Every time she sat in the guest chair of The Tonight Show, the entire studio was plunged into high alert. Eartha daringly showcased her carnal attraction. She tilted her head, using a flirtatious, whispering tone to interact with Johnny Carson, skillfully evoking the desire of millions of male viewers. The portrait of a dangerous and magical sex bomb was fully etched by her on television. However, that flirtatiousness was limited to the screen. Hidden beneath the provocative exterior was a sharp political personality and an intense spirit of resistance. Eartha Kitt was acutely aware of the issues of the day and refused to remain silent to protect personal interests or reputation. The event that decided her entire career took place at a formal luncheon inside the White House in 1968. Amidst a space gathering the elite and powerful politicians, Eartha completely discarded the image of an obedient entertainer. She stood tall, looked directly at the organizers of the event, and loudly spoke out against the ongoing war. She bluntly exposed the truth about American youth being forced onto the battlefield. That defiant declaration immediately shattered the fake tranquility of the party. The consequences arrived instantly and were incredibly brutal. Intelligence agencies opened files to monitor her. A media embargo was secretly issued nationwide. Directors canceled film scripts. Television networks cut off contact. The American entertainment industry completely boycotted her. Undeterred, Eartha packed her bags and left her homeland. For a decade, she accepted a life in exile, continuing to use her performance abilities to conquer foreign stages instead of bowing her head to apologize. Eartha Kitt lost her career in America for daring to challenge the government. However, the tragedy of the next character originated from her own body. This sex bomb was receiving the highest dance remuneration in history when she was suddenly struck down by a cruel illness, leaving her half-paralyzed and forcing her to give up all her assets to retreat into seclusion. Lola Falana signs away her entire fortune. The atmosphere in the entertainment capital of Las Vegas in the 70s was completely dominated by the magnetism of Lola Falana. Her name lit up giant billboards. The largest casino complexes emptied their purses, paying her the highest salary in the history of the performing arts just in exchange for sold-out shows. When she brought that fame to The Tonight Show studio, Lola radiated the pride of a woman at the pinnacle of power. The audience focused on her fiery body and toned physique. She displayed her sexual appeal through every movement, interacting with an absolute confidence that overwhelmed even Johnny Carson. Lola's provocativeness did not lie in ordinary flirtatious poses. It was an explosion of sensuality through wild dance moves and incredible stamina. She used that perfect body to exhaust herself on stage, directly converting the crowd's admiration into a massive financial source for herself. However, that brilliant career was destroyed by a brutal physical event. Multiple sclerosis suddenly flared up and attacked her nervous system. In a short time, the left side of the sex bomb who once drove all of America wild was completely paralyzed. Her ability to dance, her greatest profit-making tool and also her greatest pride, was stripped away forever. Facing the exhaustion of her health, Lola Falana made a decisive decision. She refused all attempts to cling to past glory or seek pity from the public. She signed papers transferring her entire massive fortune, from luxurious real estate to expensive jewelry collections, to others. She severed all relationships with the entertainment world, decisively withdrawing from material life to immerse herself in a closed-off religious life. Lola Falana let go of all fame when her body collapsed, in complete contrast to that decision. In the next chapter, audiences will witness a sex bomb who used her body in a highly calculated way. She publicly stripped in men's magazines, gathering every cent of her remuneration from exposing herself to personally seize the position of film director from male producers. Directorial rights bought with photos, Stella Stevens. Stella Stevens's presence in the media of the 60s was a whirlwind of sensuality that swept through every newsstand across America. Her nude images sat prominently on the centerfolds of the best-selling men's magazines. When she strode into the Tonight Show studio, the atmosphere was immediately heated by lustful gazes. She was not at all hesitant or trying to cover up that radiant provocativeness. Sitting in the guest chair, Stella wore aggressively cut outfits, fully showcasing her perfect physique. She calmly smiled, using her own hot body to directly challenge every strict standard of the crowd. Even Johnny Carson had to take a step back, cautiously bantering before a sex bomb who was daring and completely in control of the situation. The media and the public of that time assumed she was just a walking flower vase craving attention. The truth behind the lens was a completely different picture. Stella Stevens possessed a grand cinematic ambition along with a pragmatism bordering on ruthless. She saw right through Hollywood as a fortified bastion ruled autocratically by men. Male producers laughed at her aspirations. They decisively refused to provide funding and bluntly threw the scripts she herself had penned into the corner, refusing to play the role of a victim waiting for a handout. Stella personally mapped out a fierce plan to seize power. She publicly stripped before the camera, proactively turning herself into a sex symbol. She collected every cent of the massive fees from displaying her body in adult magazines. She transferred the entirety of that sensuality-tainted money directly into her own film production budget. With cold calculation, she used the very desire of men to fund her personal artistic aspirations. She proudly stepped onto the film set, personally holding the megaphone to direct, and officially kicked down every barrier to seize the chair of a true film director. Stella Stevens used her body as a stake to win power behind the camera. However, that economically calculated trade still hadn't touched the most brutal limit of survival. In the final chapter, Johnny Carson will open the file on a fiery black sex bomb. This woman kept her death sentence from her doctor a total secret, gritting her teeth to hide a cruel cancer to frantically plunge into life-or-death action scenes on screen. Pam Grier grits her teeth to hide a death sentence. B. Pam Grier's appearance in the 1970s media established a brand new definition of physical power. She exploded onto the screen as a fiery and uncontrollable female criminal. When entering the Tonight Show studio, the atmosphere was immediately heated by that wild dominance. Pam wore skin-tight outfits, fully displaying her radiant curves and intense vitality. She sat in the guest chair, calmly responding to Johnny Carson with a confident and nonchalant demeanor. Audiences were captivated by her powerful beauty, certain that before them was a sex symbol overflowing with vitality. The brutal truth, however, unfolded inside hospital rooms, right in the middle of her career peak. A doctor handed Pam a cancer diagnosis. Everything was clearly decided. She only had 18 months to live. Faced with a foretold death, Pam Grier made a ruthless decision with herself. She kept her medical files an absolute secret. She forbade doctors from revealing her health status to the media or film producers. Instead of being hospitalized for treatment, she forced herself back into her work schedule. She concealed physical pains behind a provocative smile. She endured body-ravaging rounds of chemotherapy alone and then immediately donned skimpy clothes, continuing to perform high-tempo action scenes before the camera. Pam used her very provocativeness and physical strength on screen to deceive the crowd, directly concealing a body that was exhausting day by day. In the quiet office, Johnny Carson pressed the off button on the VCR. The TV screen sank into darkness. 9 videotapes lay layered in the document bin. The press and the crowd had molded these 9 women into pure sex bombs serving sensuality. However, the historical truth behind the camera proved them to be pragmatic mindspeople who personally orchestrated fierce financial agreements and possessed an intensely powerful survival instinct right in the heart of Hollywood power. Under the massive pressure of debt, illness, and embargoes, these 9 women revealed an incredible decisiveness. They refused to submit or play the victim. They proactively turned physical provocativeness into their sharpest survival weapon. They directly confronted studio executives, smashed exploitative contracts, and personally decided their own careers. The resistance of which sex bomb on the list above shocked you the most? Type her name in the comments section right below. Hit the subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so we can continue to expose the next sensational files about the dark hidden corners of the entertainment industry.